Wow, that is some of the most impressive, dangerous looking helicopter flying I have ever seen on film. Which is why it's a good movie. Welcome to Movies Revisited. I'm your host, Taylor James Johnson, and today we're going to be revisiting the film Blue Thunder. This film is one of the most impressive films I've ever seen. It Top Gunned before Top Gun. It did the buddy cop thing before buddy cops were even a thing. This film is so ahead of its time and so impressive that only the military-industrial complex could have produced it. And yeah, that's what happened. Our government teamed up with Hollywood to show everybody what kind of technology we have to kick your ass. So yeah, but they made a really great movie out of it, so who gives a flying f***? That's right. Let's see what the great Chris Bumbray has to say about Blue Thunder.
Hey everybody, it's Chris Bumbray here again for JoBlo.com, and this week we're taking a look at John Badham's Blue Thunder. Now, John Badham is a name that should be well known to kids who grew up in the 80s. He directed a lot of the most popular movies of that era, including War Games, Stakeout, and Bird on a Wire, The Hard Way, and in addition to Saturday Night Fever back in 1977. This is written by Dan O'Bannon, who also wrote Alien and Total Recall, Don Jacoby, who also wrote The Philadelphia Experiment and John Carpenter's Vampires, and it stars the late great Roy Scheider, Malcolm McDowell, Candy Clark, who you may all remember from American Graffiti, Daniel Stern, and this was one of his first roles, and the late great Warren Oates, who died shortly after principal photography on this film. The score was by Arthur B. Rubinstein, who composed the soundtrack for most of John Badham's movies during this era, including Stakeout, The Hard Way, and War Games. This movie revolves around a helicopter pilot working for the LAPD named Frank Murphy, played by Roy Scheider, and he's selected to test pilot an experimental government helicopter that's called Blue Thunder. Highly sophisticated and heavily armed, Murphy discovers that the helicopter is being designed for urban use by a group within the government headed by his old Vietnam nemesis, F.E. Cochran, played by Malcolm McDowell. Now, the problem is, a lot of people think that Murphy's insane because he's got really bad PTSD. His LAPD bosses want him gone from the job because he keeps losing partners due to passing out at the controls of his helicopter and going crazy. However, Murphy steals Blue Thunder in an attempt to reveal the murderous conspiracy behind its creation, culminating in a series of spectacular dogfights in the skies above downtown Los Angeles. Now, during the early 80s, the comic book style techno-thriller was in vogue. Usually these thrillers revolved around lone wolf cops or military men given access to highly sophisticated weaponized vehicles they used to do battle with the forces of evil, or in the case of many early 80s action movies, communism. On TV, there was Knight Rider, starring David Hasselhoff and a talking car, and on the big screen, there was the infamous flop Megaforce, starring Barry Bostwick, a flying motorcycle, and, well, Barry Bostwick's weird perm. Super helicopters and planes were especially popular, with Clint Eastwood's bizarre spy sci-fi thriller Firefox featuring him stealing a Russian jet that's run by telepathy. While on TV, there was the show Airwolf starring Jan Michael Vincent, which has a lot of similarities to Blue Thunder and came out about a year or so after the film. Many believe it was actually a ripoff of this movie, and I have to say this movie itself spawned a very, very, very short-lived TV version starring, of all people, Dana Carvey. Unlike many movies featured in this column, Blue Thunder was actually a sizable hit, raking up $42 million in 1983 dollars, which would be equal to over $100 million today. That's really not bad considering that 2 weeks after it opened, a little movie called Return of the Jedi hit theaters and kinda took the air out of the box office. Blue Thunder was so well received that in the days before sequels became commonplace, it quickly spawned a rip-off TV show. And it was rushed to the air only 7 months after this hit theaters, meaning that they had to recycle pretty much all the action scenes. It really didn't last long, probably only about 11 episodes, but this film itself became kind of a cult hit on video and cable. And it's funny because by the time this actually hit cable, the TV show was long gone. Director John Badham went on to hit after hit for the rest of the decade, including the same year's War Games, which was even bigger hit, Short Circuit, and Stakeout before returning to TV in the mid-90s after a couple of flops, including the surprisingly decent Nick of Time, which starred a young Johnny Depp and Christopher Walken. Nevertheless, Blue Thunder has sunk into a kind of modest obscurity. It's well known enough that Sony has reissued it a few times on DVD and Blu-ray, but it's really rarely talked about alongside other popular action movies of the era, maybe due to the lack of a marquee star in the lead. There's been some talk about remaking it with drones, which isn't a bad idea as far as these things go, but nothing has really come to fruition yet. Now, Blue Thunder is both typical and atypical of its era. In addition to the sleek, high-tech vehicle, the hero is also a PTSD-afflicted Vietnam vet, which was something that was so common in movies back in the early 80s that the similarly themed Firefox, which came out a year before, had a hero played by Clint Eastwood with the exact same issue. Yet, while many Reagan-era actioners had a somewhat conservative, rah-rah America bent, Blue Thunder was anti-authoritarian. Here, the government is seen as kind of a sinister force, with the main conflict being that if Blue Thunder is mass-produced, citizens may find themselves unwittingly under surveillance, something which, 33 years later, has indeed happened, although the new watchers really don't need anything quite as clunky as helicopters. Now, Roy Scheider himself explained it pretty well in an interview that he gave around this time, saying that the story supposes that some right think tank or conservative group in the government decides it would be a great idea for crowd control in the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles to use these helicopters for surveillance and to arm them, which is a pretty frightening idea. Unfortunately, the other equipment they want to put on board is equipment that could look through your house, see anything that's alive, and be able to record any conversation from 500-600 feet up in the air. The ship then becomes a representation of the total invasion of privacy, a flying Big Brother. In the film, the character I play, Murphy, a Los Angeles helicopter pilot, knows this is a very evil and unnecessary thing, so he does something about it. Now, as Murphy, Roy Scheider played the last of the great 80s everyman heroes, with he-men like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone waiting in the wings to take over action flicks within a year or two. Scheider is more of a 70s style lead, in that he uses his brain and wit rather than brawn and doesn't trust the men. Now, Scheider was the king of this type of hero during this time, with this not too far removed from his role as Chief Brody in Jaws and Jaws 2. Already in his 50s, Scheider brought a rugged world-weariness to the part that really made Frank Murphy an interesting guy, and it's pretty cool that this is actually his follow-up to All That Jazz, which he was nominated for an Oscar for. There's a terrific introduction at the beginning of this movie that shows him using a high-tech, for the time, digital watch to count backwards as he tries to calm himself enough to climb into the pilot seat of his helicopter.
Mind if I ask what you're doing?
No, I don't mind at all.
Now, you could really see why Roy Scheider in this scene was a cut above the rest. Not your typical action hero, he was vulnerable. For much of the running time, you're really never sure if Murphy's up to the task of taking on the government plot behind Blue Thunder, but by the time the credits roll, he's just about eked out a victory, but at a heavy cost. Similarly, the villain is quite atypical of the time, with Malcolm McDowell low-key as Murphy's rival F.E. Cochran, a government agent who tries to frame Murphy for murder once he starts asking too many questions and later faces off with him in a spectacular dogfight above the LA skies. McDowell's lower-key performance, however, may have less to do with acting choices and more to do with the fact that he's absolutely terrified of flying, with his grimaces during the final battle being real, as he was so freaked out about being in a helicopter, and this was no secret. Malcolm McDowell later on gave an interview where he recalled working on Blue Thunder, and this is what he had to say. "I was terrified. We started out filming it on a gimbal thing, a rig designed for that purpose, with the crew moving it around. Then it was really easy to look macho and all that, but it's very different when you're actually up there in the air. They had to retake my stuff several times because I was so scared. It gave them a good laugh. Going under those bridges in the helicopter was simply terrifying. I didn't think we were going to make it. I asked the pilot, we're not going to go under it, are we? We don't have enough room under the bridge. I don't know how wide this thing is. There's just not enough. Oh my God, he just scraped the paint. I still get the old pollywoggles," and that's Malcolm McDowell's word, not mine, in my stomach when I watch that scene. In fact, I'll tell you, I can't even look at some parts of this movie. The supporting cast is really good too, with Daniel Stern as Jaffo, which means just another fucking observer, Lyman Good, the young family man partner who, if you know 80s action movies, well, probably won't be around too long past the second act. Candy Clark makes for a spunky love interest for Scheider, and it's interesting that when the movie starts, they're already in a relationship rather than falling in love as it goes on, while Warren Oates owns every scene as the typical pissed-off police captain, although he's made a lot more sympathetic here than usual given the trope. Given the era, the effects are actually pretty nifty in this film, with a lot of real helicopters used in addition to some pretty good model work and rear projection. In fact, I would say that the special effects here are a lot better than they are in Firefox, which came out a year before but probably cost about twice the amount. And it doesn't have John Dykstra, who did the Star Wars effects, doing the effects here. The action scenes are really top-notch, although one of the movie's dumber aspects is that Murphy engages the villains right over downtown LA, with missiles flying into building and presumably an astronomical body count on the ground. I guess Badham and company thought an air battle over an urban setting would be more exciting, and maybe they're onto something. I mean, heck, it worked for Marvel. Apparently, however, Scheider thought this was absolutely moronic and fought hard to move the battle out to a less populated area, as that's what he thought Murphy would do. Of course, it didn't quite work out, and Scheider himself said in an interview, "I would get rid of that Arrow Tower scene." It seemed out of character for Murphy to draw missile fire to it. To my way of thinking, they should have picked a place which was obviously abandoned where innocent people wouldn't be endangered. Kinda hard to argue with Roy Scheider there, he makes a lot of sense, but you know, Hollywood is Hollywood and they like big bangs. That aside, Blue Thunder is pretty damn exciting, with Scheider's performance grounding the film in a big way, while Badham's straightforward, some might even say workmanlike, direction a far cry from today's action directors, who bombard you with carnage. I also really like the super synthy electronic score by Arthur B. Rubinstein, with Murphy having a cool heroic theme that I'm humming to myself right now. One of the reasons that Blue Thunder works as well as it does is the acting, and I love Roy Scheider's chemistry with Malcolm McDowell, especially the way that Roy Scheider just kind of takes the piss out of him by imitating his accent.
Follow my leader.
Follow my leader.
Be on the pad, 12 sharp.
12 sharp.
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our Joe Blow channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
Love the scene where him and Oates are called out to a demonstration of the Blue Thunder and they meet with Cochran for the first time. I also love how later on in the movie, Roy Scheider describes F.E. Cochran by saying that the initials F.E. stand for, in his words, fuck everybody.
F.E. What's the F.E. stand for?
Fuck everybody.
Now, Blue Thunder is widely available on DVD, Blu-ray, iTunes, Amazon, and Netflix depending on your region, and Crackle also offers it from time to time, but be careful because it's not always in the proper 2:35:1 aspect ratio. First time I remember seeing this movie was when I was about 18 back in 1999, and it showed on an oldies cable channel called MPix, which existed here in Canada for a while. And over the years, I've returned to this one quite a bit, and it remains one of my favorite Roy Scheider vehicles. And it's really too bad that despite its box office success, it was his last big theatrical hit, with him following up with two underrated movies, Peter Hyams' 2010, which was only a modest success at the box office, despite being a good movie, and John Frankenheimer's 52 Pickup, which was a huge flop, but a great movie. If you like Roy Scheider in this movie, of course watch the first two Jaws movies, as if you haven't seen them. I think everybody's seen them at this point, specifically the first one. And of course, All That Jazz, directed by Bob Fosse. That's a great movie. But Blue Thunder, absolutely amazing movie. Check it out. I think you'll all really like it. And until next time, I'm Chris Bumbray for JoeBlow.com.
Do you think you can fly it?
You flew it, didn't you? Irritating old cocksucker, isn't he?
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. Joe Blow was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.